Over the past 50 years in the United States of America, the increase in prison population has shockingly rose by 500%, and since 2016, 2 million adults were always noted behind bars. Does incorporating prison time for racial motives or for small charges truly resolve one's decisions? Is it worth the overwhelming amounts of millions that the U.S. government spends on prison inmates yearly? Truly, does it resolve issues on both sides? Mass incarceration in the United States is seen as an ongoing issue which becomes a social and economic problem further down the road. Not only does it deprive individuals, but it also communities and families. After extensive research and gaining knowledge from classmates, I believe I could speak upon the issue of mass incarceration and how it truly affects the United States in a firm and open manner. The U.S. prison system holds 20% of the world's total prison population, causing overwhelming amounts of money, distress, and structural patterns of racism. The U.S. government needs to take into careful consideration a reevaluation upon certain crime levels and reinvesting savings for future prevention policies rather than inmates. To give criminals who may have small offense charges an opportunity for redemption is a beneficial start in not only aiding a better change for communities, but it also saves our government billions per year and opens doors for other problems that may need to be focused on. To begin this topic, I would like to explore some statistics that tie together a better understanding of mass incarceration and what we could potentially do to solve this problem. After 1970, mass incarceration was growing rapidly throughout the U.S., and it was a challenge that was long to be faced. According to the challenge of mass incarceration in America, African American males were born since the 1960s were projected to have 20% of that population confined in prisons, more than the probability of them actually even being able to attend college. This penal confinement is classified so high that it affects not only individuals, but communities down the road and as a whole. In the article, Mass Incarceration Has Been Driving a Force of Economic Equality, it is stated how all criminals who have been convicted minorly or have spent a small amount of time in jail have a combined $370 billion lost since 2016. These consequences eventually add up, and throughout the nation's 400-year scale of racial injustice, this still affects Black and Latino men who statistically make up more than half of Americans who have ever even been to prison. To put the idea of how much the U.S. government spends on inmates, the city of Kentucky projects about $15 million per year to incarcerate residents in surrounding cities. An astounding $80 billion per year annually is put into incarceration. The U.S. Many believe in reinvestments towards crime prevention policies would have a greater impact in reducing recidivism. Reinvesting towards a greater cause, such as into schools, communities, police, reentry programs, and more, would be a greater step in investing money into a system that seems more useful. Furthermore, after hearing the high price tag that comes with imprisoning people in the U.S., a greater change would reduce investments if action were to be taken. Structural racism lines up within our system still, and spending large amounts of money, especially on inmates and small offenses, does not improve the situation overall. So the question is, what would reducing mass incarceration look like, and what impact would it genuinely have upon our society in the U.S.? I propose support for the Reverse Mass Incarceration Act. It is an affirmative agenda proposed to the Biden administration by Congress that entails an important bill that would reduce both crime and incarceration on a large scale. According to the Brennan Center for Justice, Congress and the President would need to take action as soon as possible. Quick action would show how the public that demands for accountability and fairness are being taken into account. By putting this policy into action, more ground is set by the government to rehabilitate police responsibility mechanisms, community-led safety strategies, and overall use of force rules. These solutions are wide partisan consensus around the U.S., meaning many governors are for it. Action just needs to be enforced. This act is seen as a plan that would be enforced throughout a 10-year timescale, and $20 billion annually, and reinforcing the rehabilitation process would reshape the state and local policies for these certain inmates. Advancing police reform, improving on former acts that also entail rehabilitative programming, and many more other offers come with this 10-year proposal. It seems within reach for the future, and it could reduce amounts on incarceration. Any moment at which President-elect Joe Biden decides to act during a critical moment in our country's history is when all change will be seen. Such an act will have more priority than others. Requirements would be strongly enforced, one being that states would receive funding if the government saw a 7% decline in their incarceration rates during the implementation of this act. Overall, if this becomes an amendment or bill, then the government would hold everyone accountable, and this would be a strict enforcement that would be seen as helpful for many states in the U.S. Now that we have reviewed the main points of this policy and my support for it, I want us to consider how it would be a right step in the direction towards a path of less criminals, less money spent, and a brighter future. Since the majority of states are on a consensus regarding the rehabilitation of mass incarceration, the plan that comes along with many benefits on the agenda can be foreseen as a positive reaffirmation of the prison system. Whether it be for criminals, police, or even communities as a whole, change is in great hands with the Reverse Mass Incarceration Act if proposed. As voters in the room, we have an advantage to decide if we want our country safer and our community safer. And according to The Hill, states such as Mississippi have begun state policies regarding imprisonment, which have dropped prison populations by 13% already, the lowest since 1967. Through series of reforms, we can shift the paradigm of the U.S. government, but more importantly, criminals towards a better path of success. There are, unquestionably, people in the system who have committed the most heinous of crimes and are threats to society if ever released. Many against the acts that are proposed think all criminals simply deserve to be locked up, which, in all fairness, could be justified easily. But by the benefits of the policy, if imposed onto the U.S., the government isn't necessarily looking to release all inmates or suggesting any crime is less violent than another. And according to Prison Policy Initiative, the suggestion of simply investing more greatly in nonviolence programs for future criminals would have significant long-term impact on reducing imprisonment in the coming years. As a country, we must take accountability for our people who falsely represent our freedom and pride. The amount of money and social inequality of our country has faced does not correlate with the betterment of past criminals or reduction of recidivism. By implementing the Reverse Mass Incarceration Act, there would generally be a reduction of future prisoners in the near future and in the present if all implemented correctly. Though many could view mass incarceration as a personal problem for the inmates who got themselves locked in prison, many do not truly acknowledge the extra guidance one may actually need in their life to redeem themselves as a better human to our society, which in the long run could be important as each coming generation would see a fine pattern in reduction of crimes by this act. Thank you. And I have my 3 open-ended question prompts to promote conversation. My first one is, do you feel comfortable in starting on a fresh path for criminal reduction? And 2, to what extent should prisoners have opportunity for change and redemption? And 3, do you think if this act came up on a ballot, it would cause controversy? Thank you.